Welcome to the Heat Pump Week Roundtable sessions. In this session, we'll be looking at how we can prepare the workforce to meet the UK government's target of installing 600,000 heat pumps per year. We'd like to welcome Ian Rowlands from Plug Me In, Jazz Climas from City Plumbing Supplies, Louise Howlett from R.A. Brown Heating Services, Sarah Prutton from Panasonic, and Leah Robson from Your Energy Your Way.
Okay. First question. So, where are the gaps in the current workforce, and is the problem supply side or demand side? Would anyone like to start us off?
It's a nice easy one to start, isn't it? I think it's a combination of supply and demand side. I don't think you can separate the two out. It's very chicken and egg. You kind of need the demand side so that people invest in the training, but also you need the supply so that you can meet the demand. So that almost feels like one of the trickiest things, to kind of get those two things working in tandem, because you don't want either to outstrip the other, do you? So I think...
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably take a slightly different view. I think there is a demand challenge as we stand here today, and the industry needs to do more to generate and stimulate more demand, and that will give kind of a workforce, an engineering workforce, confidence that they can invest their time into moving into heat pumps.
Yeah.
I think we need more support from the government, not just kind of short-term grants, but long-term funding and investment to move in that direction.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a bit of a demand problem in terms of there's not enough workforce for gas boilers, actually, in a way, and so a lot of people don't see why they would want to change, because they're really busy and making a good living doing boilers, and so it's starting to change a bit. But the demand for getting into heat pumps, the customer demand isn't huge. A lot of plumbers are just not hearing it from customers, and so aren't seeing the need to change. But then they're maybe suddenly getting booted into it. Like if they're doing new builds, they've been installing boilers on new builds for years, and little new build developments, and then suddenly the developer says, "Oh, it's heat pumps this time," and then they've got to figure it out. And we've seen people drop out of the market, and other people move into the market because they're not ready to make that transition. So I think, it's coming from all directions. But I think the biggest problem with skilling up a heat pump workforce is just a lot of plumbers don't see the need to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's a relatively older workforce as well, so that kind of feeds into that thing of, well, I can kind of see my career out quite comfortably on gas boilers. So sorry, you're going to...
Yeah, well, I mean, we are quite stretched with where we are looking at an already understaffed workforce, especially where we are looking to upskill kind of plumbers and gas engineers. So it is really engaging with them and making that accessible. And then on the other side, by maintaining relationships with colleges and apprentices, we've recently installed some kit in local colleges, really, so they've got access to the latest in technology for the heat pump in order to plug that gap. Because as you say, there's people at the end of their career that don't want to start that level of professional development, and why would they need to? So it is also going at the other side and having new people coming into the industry and supporting them along the way as well.
I also think we're not just talking about capability from an installation and maintenance perspective. We're talking about needing a skilled workforce to kind of educate and inspire consumer confidence. And I think that's probably overlooked at times. That's something we're looking at Plug Me in particular, in terms of trying to create a really smooth customer journey for our customers, right from the survey through to design and then the installation itself. And the decarbonisation home heating report actually said that there's too much complexity, there's too much confusion, and that is stopping people making the move to heat pumps.
And that frightens off the people that are kind of thinking, should I go into the industry? And we don't want it to become elitist and stigmatised. So especially as from the perspective of a trainer, I'll always ensure that the first thing we cover off are all the scary words, all the buzzwords, because especially with the plumbers and other HVAC professionals, they've got 80% of the experience already. We just need to do that little bit extra, that crossover into the heat pumps, and we do have a workforce ready. So it's just trying to reach those.
I think what you said is very valid. That a bit about the supply and demand. You know, it's whether the consumer actually sees heat pumps as a credible solution, and that's where the education comes in from the installer. And so, sort of creating demand. But if the installer isn't confident, if they haven't really thought about transitioning, they're not going to be in that mindset to start that journey themselves. Therefore, they're not going to be speaking to their customers to help their customers go on that journey. So that's where you've got the chicken and egg kind of gap that Leah's talking about.
Yeah, it's like they've got, the installer has to make a sale, and they don't think of themselves as a sale. A lot of sole trader heating engineers, because the customer says to them, I just want a new boiler, and they go, oh yeah, okay, here's a price, and they go and do it. And they're not having to spend any time explaining or selling or describing how your life's going to be different, because the customer already knows exactly what's going to happen. It's just going to be very similar to the white box that's on the wall now. And then, so they've got a whole, it's a kind of overlooked skill area, I think, that they need to have that confidence of talking about the stuff and bringing the end customer up to speed with what life with a heat pump is going to be like, and the extra questions and complexities that are going to come out of that is a skill set that's not all that prevalent out in the market. And yeah, that's that demand and supply piece that they've got to try, and that inquiry could fall flat quite often because they don't have the confidence to talk the customer through everything that it's going to entail.
Yeah, I think another gap is other stuff that goes on in the office as well. Just like kind of the organising the projects. It's a much more of a project to put in a heat pump than it is to go and swap over a combi. So you need somebody that's in the office doing the coordination, making sure all the deliveries are arriving, making sure all the right bits are being ordered, and that takes knowledge and that takes skill. And there's other jobs as well, aren't there? There's the design work. There's a lot that goes in to installing a heat pump. And I've got 11 people working for me, and 3 years ago, none of them were doing anything in heat pumps. Most of them probably didn't even know what a heat pump was. And so that's people in the office and out on the field. So as a company, you're having to take your employees on quite an involved journey, and there isn't necessarily stuff out there that you can just send them on. You've kind of got to do a lot of that training in-house, and that's quite a load on a small installation, or on any installation business, really. And I think that's, as you say, that's overlooked.
Yeah. Would anyone like to pick up the next question?
How can we incentivise HVAC professionals to train as heat pump installers?
I don't mind starting off. So I think we need to incentivise by investing in the skill, actually. Now, we've seen with similar mass programmes, I suppose, like the smart metering installation programme, that pay alone is not just going to kind of address this. So at Plug Me In, we're taking a plumber through training to be full heat pump installers. We're doing that at our training academy at Plug Me In, and by investing in that kind of skill, I genuinely believe we kind of all need to work together on this, by the way, that's going to create a sort of more rounded opportunity for people for kind of long-term professional growth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think there's also a space to incentivise or support with the MSC side of things, the regulatory side of things, because I think that is quite a big stumbling point for a lot of installers that are looking at with that's something completely new to them. So there could be some incentives around that side of things as well.
What about incentivising self-employed engineers, because I always feel that our industry is really made up of a lot of self-employed people. Not everybody wants to be employed by an organisation, do they? Therefore, that's more challenging, isn't it, to incentivise self-employed or very, very small micro companies where there's literally 2 or 3 people. And one of the challenges, I think, is if somebody invests sort of 3 to 5 days on off-the-job training to train, you know, the transitionary course, but then they actually they could really do with some experience. You know, there's a gap there, isn't there, which is not only the training, but how do you incentivise or help somebody to get the experience after they've done that qualification? I feel you almost need to incentivise some sort of collaboration, like non-geographical, but like buddying up. I mean, we've actually offered that to a company in Scotland where they were thinking about retraining in heat pumps, but they were not. It's like, how are they going to get the experience as a sort of guy and one guy and an apprentice? But if they're prepared to come and spend some time with us, then they can get more experience. But how do you incentivise that? I feel like something like that's needed, but incentivising it for the company that's providing the work experience and the actual company that's investing even more time than just a training course. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on that.
But yeah, I mean, I think you've hit on one of the real challenges, that in a kind of self-employed sole trader type market, a day off the tools is a day not earning.
Yeah.
And you know, we've been delivering loads of training with the heat training grant at City Plumbing, and it's really great. We get the cost down to £165, I think, for somebody to do that LCL level 3 course. But that's still that's a small amount of money that they're paying, but then it's a larger amount of money that they're losing, and so they have to be quite motivated to do it. Yeah. And so you get a bunch of people through that, but that's still only part of the picture. They still then need to do a bunch of other stuff, that they need to work their way through some pathway to being an independent heat pump installer, which requires real good quality experience, ideally, where somebody who's been doing it for a while shows them the tips and tricks and the bits and bobs, and they get to practice with low pressure. And it's trying to find that pathway for them. You know, I think umbrella schemes may fill in some of that, but then there's quite a variability in how good umbrella schemes are, and the quality of the experience people are getting. And maybe spending some time employed by a larger company is a useful step for people who still want to go back to being self-employed. But then it's whether that's useful to that company or whether there's dishonesty required to say, we want to come and work for Plug Me In, love the look of it, and then they do it for 3 years and then
But do you think that people really plan their career like that? Because in my experience, and I guess that I'm part of a company where my husband's been a heating engineer for 35 years plus, and that going into employment to get the skills part, that wouldn't even enter a lot of the people, our community of heating engineers in Norfolk. You know, I could not see that happening, that being a route of hopping into an employed company to get the skills and then hopping out. They're going to want a solution and incentives as that micro self-employed company. They're going to want to be supported, because it does feel like a big leap of faith at the moment, doesn't it, to retrain in heat pumps. And if I was speaking to somebody at an installer show on one of the panel debates who'd invested in retraining, and then because of what we were just talking about earlier on, really, the not necessarily having the confidence to educate the customer, they were struggling to get the work. They'd invested in themselves, but then they weren't getting the work in heat pumps, so then they're going to have a huge gap after training before they were able to put that training into practice. So, yeah, I think that's one of the big challenges, is incentivising all these micro companies. And I can see how it works for a bigger organisation, hiring and transitioning plumbers into heat pump engineers. But how do all those, I don't know, as a plumber's merchant, do you agree that is the vast majority of our industry is made up of very small companies?
Yeah, that's it. There's a lot. I mean, I don't know the stats, but there's a lot of the heating industry at the moment is sole trader or a very small company, and for me, that's the biggest skills challenge. Is it's very hard for those people to spend time not earning money to be gaining skills, and there's ways through it, but I think it requires other people to support them in some way, whether that's as an employer, as an umbrella scheme, or subcontract installs, but with a lot of support. And a lot of the horror stories you see are where somebody's gone away and done a heat pump course and then they've been employed to do subcontract installs, but they haven't had adequate support, and that they're doing their best, but they're just not set up to succeed.
I think it's one thing, doing a course and you're coming out with some paperwork to say that you're qualified to be a heat pump engineer, but it's to your point, it's actually having that real hands-on experience and being out there, not necessarily in kind of a controlled training environment, but in a property where you're going to be, challenged with a number of, different on-site challenges, like I say. So I think this is where we do, as an industry, kind of need to work together to say, how do we, as you say, incentivize people into the workplace and get them out on site, delivering a heat pump at scale.
I think it's also about publicising it as well. You mentioned the Train to Gain grants, which I've utilised, but on my courses I'll mention that to a group of 15 people. None of them have heard of it.
Yeah.
So it's obviously not pushed enough that that's available there. There is some help there, but most people just aren't even aware of it. So it's something that I always kind of highlight, that you can go and get your level 3 in your air source heat pumps, but it is finding that solution and making sure that message then gets to the right people.
And that's where we see City Plumbing has a really big role, because the heat pump industry is good at talking to each other, but we've got tens of thousands of people coming in City Plumbing branches buying boilers, and they're the people that ultimately we need installing heat pumps. But figuring out our role in that is the challenge, because we want to support them in that transition. We want to be an active part of that transition, but at the same time we can't harm anyone's commercial interests. We can't push a certain scheme too hard if their competitor scheme is also one of our customers or whatever it is. And so it's that's a difficult thing we're trying to navigate through, is how we support our customers through that transition and put the options in front of them, because a lot of them, they're very hard to reach. A lot of these people, they probably won't watch this video. They're not on LinkedIn, they're not on Twitter, they're not seeking out this information, not reading trade press. Largely, the way they learn about what's going on in the industry is someone's popped a tent up outside the City Plumbing that they go into every day to get a boiler, and that's how they're finding out about the industry. And you're starting to see that the boiler companies are starting to push that angle and have heat pumps on their display that they pop up outside the branch, and may even make it the focus of that display. And so it's starting to be put in front of those people more, but it's still quite a long way to go. And at the moment, I think they're not being offered a full pathway through from where they're at to being a fully fledged good heat pump installer. And trying to do that is quite hard.
I wonder, just to get around that competition angle that you were talking about, is there some sort of a role for government or even local authorities? Because my local authority in Surrey has got a lot of money now for net zero skills training, and I find it a little bit depressing. It seems that a lot of that money gets funneled into college training, skills boot camps, classroom-based training, essentially. Where is the look a bit wider and say, okay, well, the things we were talking about, like incentivising other installers to help train, and how do you kind of take that broader look and say training is not just about what you learn in the classroom, it's also all the stuff that goes on at site. And it's the same with apprenticeships, exactly the same problem. It's so focused on what goes on 1 day a week in college and not the other 4 days a week, plus the holidays. Because, you're only, not even in college 1 day a week all year. Yeah. The rest of the time you're out there with your employer. Where is the focus on that? And is there a role there for local authorities? I don't know.
Sometimes incentives, you've just reminded me of, in our area at the moment, we've actually got a deep green grant of £5,000 to incentivise people to take up particular apprenticeships, and the low carbon heating technician apprenticeship is included in that funding. But unfortunately, that hasn't been enough to facilitate our college to actually be able to deliver it. They have got heat pumps in a training facility now, but they haven't been able to launch the low carbon heating technician course this academic year, which fits in with when this deep green £5,000 funding is available. So in terms of incentives, sometimes it takes a lot more even than what seems like significant financial incentives, because you've still got that lack of awareness or lack of motivation from employers to train an apprentice in the low carbon heating technician apprenticeship, because it's new and because people would have to have a vision for their business going into heat pumps to actually take on an apprentice specifically to train in that area.
And maybe that comes back to the supply and demand question that we started with, is that until gas boiler installers, customers are banging on their doors saying, I want a heat pump, give me a heat pump.
And that isn't happening.
It's not happening. No.
It's not happening because the homeowners can't see the benefits, not clearly, not easily at the moment. There are benefits, and we know that, but it's a very hard sell at the moment, isn't it? So,
yeah, definitely.
In terms of incentivising people to train in it, the homeowners would have to be like beating down our doors in enough numbers for people to feel they wanted to sort of get on the bandwagon of becoming a heat pump installer, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and it's interesting what that consumer demand looks like. Octopus, for instance, are booked up months in advance. So there's demand for a heat pump install from a large company that people feel like they can trust, who are offering a killer price. So there is demand out there, but not many people are able to stimulate that number of inquiries in the way that Octopus are. And you can see why maybe that kind of picture is a bit off-putting as well to a small installer who's kind of they're looking at what a big company might be able to offer an install for and thinking, I can't compete, before they even start.
Some really great points there, but I wonder if we should kind of tackle the next questions.
Yeah, right, shall I go on?
Oh, we've kind of touched on it a bit. How can we attract new entrants to the industry?
So I think it's a lot of young people, especially, are not wanting to be involved in exacerbating climate change. And that's probably the starting motivation, is people want to be involved in renewables more than they, if you're a young person, you probably don't want to start in on gas if you can avoid it. And so I think that's all there, but those people need a lot of skills. And then the challenge is, the people who are skilled and experienced and capable people in the heating industry, and persuading them that it's worthwhile for them to add heat pumps because they've already got so many of the skills. And I just think it pays well. Being a heat pump installer pays well. And you can have a nice, steady, salaried job on good pay as a heat pump installer compared to a slightly more precarious existence as a sole trader boiler installer. So it's getting that message out to people and getting them that pleasant experience of doing well with it.
This isn't an easy question, is it? I mean, we need to convince a new generation to make the move to heat pumps, and almost we need to make this industry as attractive as possible and be known for the technology, be known for the kind of quality standards. I was speaking to one of our installers, Aidan, recently, who said he feels that he needs to be at the absolute top of his game every single day on site, and he has kind of genuine pride in what he does. And it almost challenges the perception of trades industry in many ways. Yeah. And I feel that, a new generation will see that and want to follow. So let's create a sector with well-paid jobs. That's absolutely fundamental, but fulfilling through the right training, have training opportunities available to offer kind of long-term sustainable careers for people. And that's where, like I say, an attraction piece for new people entering this market.
Yeah. We've already been doing this. This is what we've already been doing. So we've had an apprenticeship programme in our company for 25 years. Yeah. And we've been installing heat pumps for 15 years. And when we don't have any problem recruiting apprentices. And I think that those young people, even 15 years ago, I think they do take on board the future being heat pumps. And they're happy and want to learn heat pumps, and also the variety of work. I mean, the type of work that we do as a kind of artisan, bespoke heat pump installer, they know they're going to have quality work, they're going to have exciting, it's not something I can do, but, planning out a plant room, they get to do that high-end work. Yeah. And that does, that when we hire a new apprentice, we're very clear with them that we want creme de la creme, really, because they're going to potentially be working with the end customer. The end customer, it's not like working on a building site in our company, and young people they do want that sort of career. And when they've completed their apprenticeship, they are just so enthusiastic and proud of what they've done and proud of the work that they do. So I think companies like my company already embodying what you're talking about. Yeah.
I think it's almost like it's almost the silver lining of the current situation is that the installers that we've got at the moment, they are the proactive ones that are genuinely interested, that work to a really high quality. So there is actually an opportunity there if we've got those kinds of installers at the moment that are going out of their way and want to be top of their game. So it's that silver lining that is also a massive opportunity for us.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of there's a carrot and stick going on where there's good careers in heat pump installation, and it's the thing with the future, whereas installing boilers ultimately isn't the thing with the future longer term. And so there's lots of things pulling people towards it. But also, there is stick occurring. Building regs have changed. New builds won't be able to have boilers before too long. And, we hear it from customers quite often. We'll have customers who a big core part of their business is installing boilers for local developers on new build sites, and they're now coming to City Plumbing and saying, right, I've got to do heat pumps on this one. Where do I start? What can you design the system for me? Yes, we can, but also we need to hook them up with the manufacturer to get the training and try and help them along with doing it right. And that's outside of that MCS pathway. It's a different market, but you're going to have lots of people installing heat pumps who weren't previously, and developing the skills outside of the kind of frameworks of chasing MCS certification. But then they will have some experience, good or bad, that then in future might bring them into the retrofit heat pump market as well.
But at your end of your way, we're all about getting more women into the sector, because I think it's 50% of the population kind of being largely ignored by the average person who goes into somebody's home to fit a heat pump. And so I think getting the message out there to different sectors of society, it's not just about attracting women, it's about attracting people from ethnic minorities as well. It's a really male white industry, and these are, as we said, fantastic well-paid jobs. There's a lot of really great female influencers out there on TikTok and Instagram. I think more could be done to give them more of a platform, because they've got a lot of followers and they're out there kind of as electricians and as plumbers. Really, there's a lot of young women watching these Instagram and these TikTok channels. So I think there's a lot more that we could do kind of just creatively about thinking about who and where we promote the industry to. So one thing that we did when we recruited our 4 female apprentices is went to different places. So who might be attracted to installing heat pumps, where it might be a woman who's already into the outdoors, who's already quite sporty, who already likes doing like physical things. So advertise in your local climbing wall, advertise in your local bike club, go to your local athletics track. You know, these are the places where these women are hanging out already. So go and, you know, target some adverts when you're recruiting to those kind of places, because, you know, obviously solely employing women is against the law, but you can take, you know, the positive discrimination stuff of actually going out and making sure that the right kind of people are seeing the adverts that you've got. And I think people just need to kind of think a bit more creatively, like don't just advertise vacancies in the places where you always advertise vacancies. Think about different stuff. You know, I'm sure there's loads more ideas that other people could come up with, but where are we trying to pull people from? Because, you know, brilliant jobs, well paid, interesting, active. Let's find people who we can connect with on that basis and get them into the industry. You know, where's the program on TV about like the real apprentice? That's missing, isn't it? Because kids go into areas that they see on the telly. They go to be lawyers or policemen, or, you know, there's the series on TV and stuff. So there's definitely more that we could be doing. There's a lot more creative as an industry. And we're a very small firm. There are other much bigger firms out there who could be doing some really fun, really good stuff. Somebody else suggested to me the other day, ex-female athletes. You know, your athletics career probably lasts until you're 30. What do you do next? Women who've come out of the army, obviously, lots more women in the army now. What are we doing as an industry to just think outside the box with recruitment? I think is a big question.
Don't you feel, though, you're just reminding me of when we've reached out to our local schools, you know, even for STEM, you know, sort of sessions, and we found it really challenging because schools are so focused on exam results that they don't seem to give the young people a full sort of careers opportunities. And even when you've got a local company like ourselves and we're reaching out to our local high school, saying we'll come in and we'll talk about heat pumps, we'll talk about heating as a career. And unfortunately their timetables seem to be so squashed with stuff which is focused on exams that they don't even have time to engage in a local, you know, company like ourselves who's willing to give up some time and send one of our, you know, I've tried in the past to send one of our engineers in to go and inspire the young people and, you know, it hasn't worked, which is very disappointing, you know, the way that our school system's set up. Because
personally, I think you need to get people a bit later. So I think you catch them when they've done their university degree, they're kind of working in Costa and they're quite bored, and pitch it to them then. I think
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but isn't it, you know, for a small company when we're all kind of watching everything we pay has to be chargeable and we're up against the octopus model, then you kind of, with the living wage going up, we're kind of a bit stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of the age of apprentices. It's easier if you take a school leaver, then you've got a little bit of time when you know you can pay them a lower amount whilst they're settling in, whilst they're beginning to build the first skills. But I personally would prefer to take apprentices, say after A-level age or something like that, definitely. But it's kind of quite challenging at the moment in you know, in that way that we've had an apprentice that's wage has gone up, like shot up because of an age bracket with the living wage going up, and that kind of throws out your incentives as they're training, because suddenly the minimum wage has shot up, and so for a small company, trying to watch every penny and charge everybody out.
I do believe there is a genuine appetite, though, for young people to move into this sector. You know, we work with a number of kind of local youth zones across Greater Manchester and Wigan and Manchester, and invite them into our training academy to get sort of, you know, make it really fun, interactive, pick up a screwdriver and, you know, do some soldering work and things like that. And there's some genuine talent, you know, there, and real interest in moving into this into this industry. And I wonder, we've seen some specific examples where, they're too young today, but they can't wait to come out of school so they can move into this. And I think there's more that we can be doing. Particularly, I totally agree on the male-dominated industry that we are in terms of attracting the female generation as well.
I think another thing that's happening already is it's not just about, we've talked about young people, we've talked about people already in the heating industry, but there's the third group which is coming in, which is electricians and people who've been doing other trades or who've had a completely different career and have decided to start doing this. And you see quite a lot of them, a lot of MCS certified heat pump installation companies started out as an electrical company. And I think the electrical industry is more used to certification and admin than the heating industry. And so they just have to learn how to do heat pumps. They just have to learn how to do heat pumps, but they don't have that big jump in admin overhead that a heating engineer would see in that transition. And so and there's some really fantastic companies doing heat pump installations who've come from an electrical background. And so I think that there's also going to be that. There's going to be people coming in from other spheres, and kind of as a plumber's merchant, it's a bit of a risk because some of those customers are used to shopping at an electrical merchant, and then the electrical merchants kind of got their eye on our customers and our business. So it's a thing we're very aware of, is how we support those people, because actually the electrical merchant wants to sell them a heat pump and a bunch of electrical accessories. They can't sell them radiators and copper pipe, and stocking those is a nightmare. So we're kind of very conscious of that sector. And I think 40% of MCS certified heat pump installation businesses started out in electrical. So it's a really big chunk of the industry.
Do you think there's a qualification needed there? I'm just thinking, because obviously you've got the 5-day course at one extreme, you've got a 3-year apprenticeship at the other. I'm wondering, is there a qualification that could be done in evenings or across a year, or something that took people either from the electrical trade or another trade, or from an entirely different profession, because it doesn't feel like there's anything in between?
So how do those electricians transition? Because if to do the transition course, level 3, 5-day course, whatever, they have to have a level 2 in plumbing or plumbing and gas, or plumbing and oil normally. How do they do that transition?
Well, so a lot of the times they'll hire a plumber, so they'll know plumbers. They'll hire a heating engineer, and then just say to that heating engineer, your job's to get good at installing heat pumps, and we'll look after the admin. And they might have got MCS already for solar, and then tacking on heat pumps, employing a couple of heating engineers isn't that big of a step, isn't that big of an extra overhead. But
so they do need those skills in their company.
Yeah, but what you're pointing out is right. If you want to do the 5-day course, you've got to have a level 3, right?
Level 2.
Level 2, sorry. So how do you then transition people who need something in the middle?
And I think the big missing piece of support for me is supporting companies who are doing that training on the ground, because there's lots of money being pumped into the courses, and loads of people going through the courses, and both in colleges and the kind of the heat training grant for people in the industry. But then they need good quality experience, hands-on. They need to learn about designing systems and judgments you have to make in that process, and all of those parts aren't currently supported by government. And so, you guys are spending a lot of money on people you're employing.
Different
you're all spending a lot of money on employing people, and you're saying it's a challenge with minimum wage going up, and it needs support. But then I suppose it's probably another layer of admin, isn't it, if you do that, because the government won't want to just give money away, and it would be terrible if they gave money to people to employ people and give them bad experience. Yeah, no, it's all right. I'll grab the card. What have we got? Right. Final question. In one sentence.
Oh, okay.
I
know.
Summarise what needs to happen next to build the required workforce.
I would say think about training as more than just a short course in a classroom that teaches you how to install heat pumps. Think about training much more broadly.
Mine's going to be around training and just taking the advantage of what training is available and utilising manufacturer training. It's one of the quickest, easiest ways to kind of gain a lot of experience and as well, especially when they do the design side. So yeah, with the training.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we need to make heat pumps mainstream. I believe we need the right skill, not just from an installs perspective, which we've talked today, but to remove that complexity away from customers. That's certainly a big focus for us at Plug Me In.
I feel that the skills will follow, or the driver for skills will follow consumer demand. So I feel like we need real clarity in the industry about when the fossil fuels are going to be phased out, and then people can plan in their businesses about transitioning. And actually consumers will have a clear idea as well about transitioning, and that the skills will follow the consumer
Be unlocked
demand.
through training, yeah.
I think the risk needs to be taken out of trying to build the skills. It wants to not be a punt for people. It wants to not be a punt for the companies training people or the sole traders trying to gain these skills. There needs to be some money to mean that people aren't taking as much of a risk when they build up skills, either in a workforce or themselves.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching this Heat Pump Week Roundtable session. If you have any questions about the session, please post them below. To view more sessions on the strategic pathway to mass heat pump adoption and how local authorities and housing associations can scale and finance heat pump adoption, please visit our channel. Thank you to Plug Me In for their support in making these sessions possible.